following the COVID pandemic, we need to put nature at the heart of how we live and operate, and we should look towards a fairer and more sustainable and more resilient future. World leaders are calling on the world to rebuild the foundation of our economic and sustainable and social system. So why do you think it is important to have this discussion today on a podcast in Romania on sustainability and sustainable living?
Well, thanks for having me. And I really hope that I can, and I'm excited to be part of this movement that you've started, that we can be part of your initiatives to create more awareness in Romania. In fact, awareness about sustainability issues needs to be discussed in all countries, both in Romania, in Sweden, and globally. And it's fantastic that you try to do it in a podcast now. And I would say that public awareness is important for several reasons. And let me mention two of these reasons. I mean, the first one is that the public makes up the society that is in transition. And for that reason, we, the public, the society, needs to understand the why, the what, the how, the why the transition is needed, what the transition is about, and how we can all help to ensure that the transition is done successfully. And for transition to be successfully, we all need to change our behavior and our attitudes, and awareness drives attitude, and attitude will drive our behavior. So it all links together, I believe. And awareness, such as coming out of this podcast, will very much help us to do our part as being members of society in transition, and also help us check on the authorities, on the government, and on the private sector, business, industry, that they are doing the right things in order for there to be a sustainable development and a transition into a more sustainable society.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Sweden is known for a lot of things. We know IKEA, we know ABBA, we know Spotify, and actually we are going to use Spotify for the podcast. But to that list, we have to add the leading position to the country sustainability ranking. So let me ask you, what does it actually take to get that place?
Well, the motto in Sweden for achieving the sustainable development goals can be summarized as the world's greatest challenge, the greatest opportunity. And I think those two things embodies the enormous challenge it is to reach all those 17 sustainable development goals. But it also shows how important it is, because we need to remember the gains to individuals, to society, and to our planet when we actually achieve the sustainable development goal. That's why it's worth and important to do it. And of course, it's flattering for my country, Sweden, to be to be listed at number one place. And at the same time, Sweden continues to suffer costs from climate change, from inequality issues, from unhealth amongst the population. And we have also found that even if we are very far ahead, we need to do things faster in order to reach the goals on time. So what did we actually do to get this far? Well, I want to mention three factors to begin with. The first factor is that the decision making by the government and parliament is made for the long term. The most important example of this is the Swedish climate policy framework, which was adopted by the parliament a few years back. This climate policy framework sets the goal of zero net emissions by 2045. And because it's a long-term goal, it ensures that planning and investments can go beyond any single government. And the second thing is relates to the private sector. The private sector is also an absolutely necessary part of the sustainable development in Sweden and everywhere. And in Sweden, the private sector, they've understood themselves what they can gain from a more sustainable society, and that their business can thrive in a more sustainable society. So many businesses and industry, they will invest themselves in making these changes, will in fact lead to a sustainable development. And it's important here to recognize that this means that they are not just expecting a quick financial return, but they are actually building something that will be profitable and competitive in a more sustainable future that is coming very fast. So this is an important factor to remember for the private sector. The third thing is that I want to mention as an important factor are the consumers and the customers, because in fact they can create they can put pressure on the private sector and the public sector because of their expectations. In Sweden, people expect that are put on the market will not be harmful to the environment. And in fact, this behavior by the consumers, by the people in Sweden or in Romania, can in fact have an important effect on the changes that the private sector and the industry needs to do. In terms of the basis of the work of the government, Sweden has an action plan for the Sustainable Development Goals, and this is a tool that helps to steer all government policy towards Sustainable Development Goals. There's also a great number of different strategies that will lead up to to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I'll just mention a few, but they are important. One strategy on sustainable consumption, a strategy on men's violence against women, a strategy on smart industry, a strategy on circular economy. These are just a few different strategies, but they all work together to the same goal. And here I want to mention the last thing, perhaps how important it is for ministries and the government to cooperate, using these strategies in cooperation and working between themselves, within the government, between the government and the public agencies to drive the progress. And the last thing, which is necessary to be successful, is that you can measure the progress. If no one knows what has been done from one year to the other, it is very easy that nothing actually changes. So measuring the achievements, measuring the improvements are absolute key in order to have successful sustainable development. And I do, if I may, I want to mention three more issues that are relevant to achieve these enormous, but also life-changing and planet-saving sustainable development goals. And the first one is where you start a little bit awareness and education. And here I'd like to mention that awareness of your one individual role of a person, the implications that I have on nature through my behavior, is something that is in fact taught in schools. It is something that is taught and discussed in the schools in Sweden. And sustainable development is not a separate subject in the schools, but it's in fact part of the social sciences and the natural sciences. And that gives a very important foundation for every human being to know what impact they have on the environment and how we can help to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. The second thing is technology and innovation. And here I want to mention how important it is that the government and the private sector and the academia work together to find innovative technology to help make changes to more sustainable society. And the last thing I mentioned here is motivation and the will to change, because technology and innovation, they will be great tools, but it's not enough to make the full transition. We also need to change the way we think, the way we behave, and we need to have that motivation and will to change. So there must be a change of attitude and mentality. And let me just mention here, I mean, there's an increased demand in Sweden, but also here in Romania, for instance, for electrical cars. And that, I think, will probably will drive a little bit the industry. That's good news for the car industry. It's good news for the environment. And then we need to realize that we also need the other infrastructure, for instance, the charging infrastructure, in order for electric cars to be able to run on the streets and on the countryside in Romania. So it all needs to go together.
Great answer, and you actually managed to answer some of the questions I intended to ask you. Let's focus our attention on the responsible consumer. And actually, a responsible consumer, it means that we try to avoid food waste as much as possible. You need to choose less polluting products, which favors products that are good for the planet. But every Romanian throws away over 100 kilograms of food every year, and 50% of Romanian population is obese. So it's a paradox. Where does responsible consumption start?
This is a very interesting question, Nicoleta. I mean, when you put it like that, it's easy to think, does it start with me as the consumer? Because I'm the one that goes to the store and can pick whatever products I want. Or does it in fact start with the producer? Because the producer is the one who puts the product, who makes the product, who knows what's in the product, and also decides for the packaging of the product. So does the responsible consumption start with the producer, or does it start with the government and the legislator? Because through legislation, we can decide what kind of packages should be allowed in order not to be harmful to the environment, and also what the content should be and look like in order for it to be sustainable. So all in all, I guess all three different levels are needed in order to have responsible consumption. It needs to work together, and we all need to be more aware, of course, of all these, of the responsibilities of these different levels.
You have been living in Romania for over a year now, and you spend a lot of time here, I guess. What are the things that you have encountered or that have prevented you from maintaining the sustainable habits that seem natural at home in Sweden?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say in Sweden, you would have many people are very environmentally aware. And at the same time, being mentally aware does not necessarily mean that you can take that all your actions are environmentally sound or environmentally fully sustainable. But there are a few differences, things that I've noticed since I live in Romania, in Bucharest, and this is seen from living in a city.
Yes,
of course. So the first thing I would mention is the lack of proper recycling facilities. In Sweden, every household will have recycling at their door, at their home. It will be paper, plastic, glass, metal, and the household, the food waste most of the time. And this is nationwide, and it happens everywhere. And in fact, this is also something that is, you do it, kids do it in school. So today, this is something that is natural, and not being able to recycle is unnatural. That's where we've come today in Sweden. And another thing that is not possible here fully yet is the recycling of bottles and aluminium cans to have a refunding system. So in Sweden, we have a nationwide refunding system. Basically, a small charge is included in the price of the plastic bottle and the aluminium can that you buy. And then you get that money back when you bring the bottle or the can to the refunding machine. And these refunding machines you can find in all local food stores all over the country. And actually now Sweden has attained, I think, 85% of all bottles and cans are being recycled and refunded at the moment. And perhaps the last thing I mentioned is that I do feel that there is too much unnecessary plastic when I buy takeaway food or in other ways. I mean, things that you don't need simply. And we've tried to make the embassy a plastic-free area, and it is hard work to manage that. So I'll stick to those examples.
Okay.
I actually want to Nicoleta, can I just mention one thing?
Please,
one more thing.
please.
It is not perhaps the most obvious one that you would think, but I will say it as I look out to the big street where the Swedish embassy is located here in Bucharest, which is on Tosiaua Kiselev. Beautiful street, lots of cars. And I want to mention actually the fact that driving above the speed limit is not good for the environment, because if you drive very fast or in a very reckless manner, not only will you, of course, risk having an accident yourself or risk having someone else in an accident, but in fact, driving like this consumes more petrol from your car, because most people still have petrol cars, and that will actually end up in more emissions, more pollution. So it's something that we perhaps don't think about, but it would be good for several reasons to drive in a slightly, to stick to the speed limit and to drive in a more subtle manner.
Mm-hmm. And now the final question, a question that I will ask every guest on this podcast. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sustainable is Therese Hydén's lifestyle?
Nicoleta, this is the moment of truth, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And oh my God, it's. I would say a 5 or possibly a 6. I would say I'm one of those persons who I'm sustainably and environmentally aware, but it is hard to fully turn that into action. So I have a petrol car. The embassy has a petrol car. I do buy products probably that have had too much of an environmental impact before it arrived in Romania, and I do use products with a lot of plastic, etc. I'd like you to come back perhaps in 6 months
I will. In 2 months, we will have another interview to ask you the same question to see if the percentage is higher than today.
Thank you.
Therese, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure, and I'm anxious to see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.